Korean filmmaking has undergone an enormous transformation since the industry's inception in the early 1900s. Through Japanese occupation and the Korean War, which was immediately followed by a military regime, films were continually subjected to strict government censorship. This continued until 1996, when film censorship was ruled unconstitutional, and the entire process of filmmaking, which had previously been fastidiously screened by government officials, was finally freed. Korean movies would never be the same, and perhaps no other film better exemplifies this evolution than Park Chan-Wook's 2003 masterpiece. Welcome to the making of Oldboy. In 1996, the Futabasha magazine, Weekly Manga Action, a new series was serialized. Written by Garance Chia and illustrated by Nobuaki Menegishi, the story revolves around a man who, under mysterious and unknown circumstances, found himself imprisoned in a room until 10 years later when he was inexplicably released. The manga was named Oldboy. And on one fateful day, this manga found itself in the hands of a very important character in our story. Movie producer Lim Song-young.
별로 할 일도 없고 동네 만화방에 갔었는데 그 전에 저희 시나리오를 쓴 황조윤 작가가 올드보이가 되게 재밌다라는 얘기를 한 적이 있었어요. 올드보이 만화책의 어느 부분에 그 한 컷이 한 장면인 컷이 있어요. 거기에 남자 얼굴이 이렇게 비클로즈업으로 그려져 있는데 최민식 선배 같더라고요. 그거 보고 최민식 선배가 하시면 좋겠다.
Lim Song-young first met Park Chan-wook during the production of The Humanist, a film in which Mr. Park Chan-wook was working as the screenwriter. Less than 2 weeks after these initial contacts, Lim Song-young took a plane to Japan to visit Futabasha, the copyright holder for the manga series Oldboy, and the two entities struck up a contract. Right away, Park Chan-wook knew that he wanted to imbue classical Greek elements in the story, specifically those of Oedipus Rex. And it was the incorporation of this mythology that would elevate our story's shallow revenge narrative into something far more twisted. Park Chan-wook's perspective on revenge is what defines the film, a perspective very much influenced by his upbringing in a constantly changing Korea. Mr. Chan-wook describes his childhood growing up in Seoul in the late 60s and 70s as very mediocre. From a young age, he was an avid reader. He found that reading inspired movies to play out in his mind. Even when reading abstract or conceptual literature, I would always think of images in my head as I'm reading. Of course, if it's a brilliant novel or play, it has all the elements that will inspire these images within you. So you get to imagine what the space looks like when the story is happening, or what kind of clothes the characters are wearing. What does the season look like? Or even, what kind of tree is standing in that space? Because I grew up in a typical middle-class household with nothing dramatic or eventful in my life, I've always been drawn to this exotic, dramatic world abroad. He discovered his love for movies by watching Hollywood and European classics on the American Forces Korea Network TV channel at home. Since I was young, from when I was in elementary school to when I entered college, there was this television channel that played broadcasts for the US Army in Korea, and the things playing on that channel had no subtitles either. In addition to that, even though the films were in color, I had to watch them in black and white because Korea only started broadcasting color television in the 80s. So in addition to imagining the story, I also had to imagine what the color was supposed to look like. He cites watching Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo as a moment of epiphany for him. He had to pay close attention and imagine the whole story as he watched it. Later in life, Mr. Chan-wook earned a degree in philosophy from the renowned Sogong University in Seoul. During this period, South Korea's pro-democracy movement, led largely by student groups, was reaching its height in opposition to the oppressive dictatorship of Chun Doo-hwan. Here's Park Chan-Wook on remembering that time. In 1982, the time when I had entered college, was a very important time in modern Korean history because there were a lot of active student demonstrations against the government. It was a similar situation to that of the late 1960s in Europe. It was difficult to have normal classes in college at the time because the police army, not simply policemen from the station, but an army of policemen, used to stay at college campuses and use violence to fight against the student demonstrations. Every day we had to deal with tear bombs on campus, or we would hear news of friends or other students who had killed themselves by jumping off buildings, or we would hear of people being tortured by the police. It was a difficult time, and also a difficult time for college students to actually study at college. As people he knew were taken by the authorities, he recalls feeling a mix of deep anger along with self-hatred and shame for not taking action due to his self-professed fear of violence. I was in the middle of all that extreme violence happening around me, and it completely crushed my typical middle-class life. All of the things happening increasingly made me feel like a coward. Later in life, he processed his trauma through filmmaking. Thematically, revenge is at the root of much of his work. I didn't want to portray this feeling of revenge explicitly, for instance, by having this military dictator assassinated on the screen. Perhaps you could say that would be true revenge. But I was more interested in focusing on that personal feeling of hatred and rage, and how that internally affects us and causes the collapse of our internal self. What Park Chan-Wook wanted to do was take these feelings and experiences that are influenced by his Korean upbringing and transform them into something universal, something that viewers everywhere could understand. With Oldboy, I wanted to make a film that wasn't limited by the need to understand the context and setting of South Korea at the time. I wanted to explore pure genre and create a more mythological kind of story that anybody can relate to. The film's iconic twist occurred to Mr. Chan-Wook while he was in the midst of an intense brainstorming session with co-writers Hwang Cho-yeon and Lim Jin-hyung. They had been trying to figure out a worthy villain motivation story, since the manga's explanation was less than satisfactory. In the source material, the imprisonment was orchestrated because of boyhood insecurities and subsequent jealousy. While Mr. Chan-Wook took a break to the restroom, it dawned on him that the manga failed to explain exactly why the protagonist was released after 10 years. Why not 9 years or 30 years? That's when I thought of the character of Dae-soo's daughter, and how 15 years would be about the amount of time necessary for her to mature into an adult. Perhaps the crime that Dae-soo committed had to do with a revealing secret that the villain had involving incest, and then Dae-soo is imprisoned and released so that he can receive the same punishment. Both of the mysteries could be resolved by combining them into one. As soon as I returned from the restroom, I told my producer everything in a rush, and that was how the whole story was decided. Typically, in mystery novels or mystery movies, the plot is about who did it and why. You almost never question whether these questions themselves are valid. So I thought that putting the question into the center of the story would be something quite new, and I think that's what makes Oldboy the film that it is. Despite the censorship laws now being abolished, the twist that defines the film was still very controversial. Mr. Chan-Wook remembers that when producer Song Young first read the Oldboy script, he was flabbergasted at the movie's revelation. And when the film was completed and investors saw a cut, they insisted the director remove it in post-production. Ultimately, and thankfully, he won the battle. The first day of filming was May 12, 2003. They filmed in Changcheong-don, Seoul. This scene involved Ore-soo and Mi-do walking the streets, trying to discover where his estranged daughter may be. Right away, Mr. Chan-Wook tries to impress upon Jae-min-sik, his character Ore-soo's current state of mind.
한번 빨리 막 가봐가지고 따라붙는가 싶었는데 또 벌어지고. 액션! 액션! 뭐 문제 없지? 네.
Jae-min-sik first entered the public consciousness as an actor on stage. He starred in a slew of successful theater productions throughout the 90s. His breakout role that cemented his career as a movie star was the 1999 action hit Shiri, a total success and the highest-grossing South Korean film at the time. That performance earned him the Best Actor at the Grand Bell Awards. Following this, he garnered several acting accolades from various Korean film festivals for his roles in films like the 2001 romantic drama Peilan and the 2002 historical drama Painted Fire. When he was cast as Odiseo in Oldboy at the age of 41, he fully committed himself to the role. Determined to do nearly all his own stunt work, he trained for 6 straight weeks in preparation. As a seasoned and respected performer, he took on the unofficial role of acting coach to the rest of the cast. Throughout the shooting diary, we often see him rehearsing with his younger co-stars and giving them acting suggestions.
15년도 참았는데 예를 들어서 그런 정서의 변화들이 다 그런 것들이 다 사라지면
그러니까 후배들하고 촬영을 하다 보면은 그 선배가 그 해야 될 몫이 있어요.
Alongside Mr. Min-sik is star Kang Hae-jeon. Her first film role was in the 2001 art house film The Butterfly, for which she won Best Actress at the Busan International Fantastic Film Festival. In her audition for Oldboy, she set herself apart by borrowing a sashimi knife from a nearby restaurant. On her way out, she tripped and fell. Mr. Chan-Wook, endeared by her clumsiness, cast her as Mido. At the age of 21, Oldboy would be her second ever feature film. In the shooting diary, you can tell she's still a novice by how giggly and nervous she appears on set. She gets really upset with herself anytime she makes a simple mistake.
에버그린 용역. 다시 할게요.
바로 다시 할게요.
에버그린 올드보이즈 상록고등학교 페이지.
밖에서 심호흡 한번 하고 지금 띵해서
During the scene in which her character is hugging Dae-soo before he faces off with villain Woo-jin, she has a really hard time keeping it together.
모래알이든 바위든
왠지. 싫어.
잘해.
죄송합니다 선배님. 진짜 그러지 마세요. 나 가는데.
미니 플로 뭐 하는 거야?
진짜 죄송합니다.
Ever the professional, Mr. Min-sik steps in to suggest they give her a moment alone to recenter with her character.
정기서
예.
시간 좀 갖자.
예.
좀 몰입이 깨져서.
예, 죄송합니다.
아니 한 3분만 시간 좀.
나 조용들하고.
They do, and when it's time for another take, she finds herself much more comfortable in her character's skin.
우리 아저씨 앞에서 무릎 꿇고 싹싹 빌게 해주세요.
The production gets a surprise visit from actor Son Kang-ho, who is working on a nearby set for Bong Joon-ho's 2003 movie Memories of Murder. He stands by Mr. Chan-wook and watches the monitor, happy to goof off and disrupt their first day of filming at any given opportunity.
프레이밍 됐을 때 좀 더 오래 가만히 좀 있어 좀. 말 좀 하자.
Very early in the shooting diary, you get a feel for Park Chan-wook's go-with-the-flow personality. After every take, the actors on hand gather around director Chan-wook as he watches back the scene on the monitor. Crew members and actors call out little errors or mishaps as they see them, but Mr. Chan-wook has the ultimate say.
수고하셨습니다. 수고하셨습니다. 감사합니다. 괜찮은 것 같은데? 오케이. 네, 오케이입니다. 분위기가 어색하잖아.
It seems like a collaborative effort, as he is very open to the actors' suggestions on what their character may do in any given moment.
냄새에 뭐 민감한 반응을 보여야 돼. 그러니까 냄새 종류가 별로 몇 가지 안 되는 공간에서 살던 나온 사람이니까 더 민감할 것 같아.
He seems to have a disarming appreciation for moments that are unintentionally funny, like the scene where Dae-soo bumps his head while scrambling to stop Mido from reading his diary.
돌다가리거든. 자 일단 보자.
The first turtle production encounters occurs while filming at the Seoul Metropolitan Subway. The crew is on standby with their giant animatronic ant as line producer Han Jae-took argues with an administrative metro operator. Mr. Jae-took believed he had already obtained approval to film in a train car, but the metro employee was more concerned about the high traffic of transit riders at that time.
타셔가지고 저희가 뭐 일방적으로 저기 타지 말라고 그런 게 아니라 바쁘시면 타실 수 있잖아요. 옆판으로 이동을 하는데 근데 이 정도 지금 구경은요 당연히 그럴 수밖에 없어요. 그래서 저희가 지금 모르고 지금 오래 했나 본데 제가 한 칸만 찍는 건데 장하면서 이쪽으로 오는 것까지는 양해를 받았어요. 양해를 받고 저희가 탄 열차 번호를 말씀을 드리면은
In spite of this confusion, Mr. Jae-took is able to negotiate and filming resumes. Another stressful day of filming takes place in Busan, near Puyong National University. Mr. Chan-Wook was disturbed to discover that the university buses frequently drove by their location, since he wanted the setting in the movie to be nondescript.
지금 같으면 그게 정말 영화에 잘 보일지 안 보일지를 따져보고 정 문제라면 후반에서 컴퓨터 그래픽으로 어떻게 하든가 뭐 좀 더 쉬운 방법을 찾았을 텐데 몽땅 그 지나가는 버스 다 잡아서 이렇게 하라고 하니까 당황했죠.
The location is an expansive courtyard. The crew exhausted themselves setting up the lights and crane for the camera. The courtyard was absolutely surrounded by screaming fans watching from the railings. The crew had to manage the crowds the best they could so they wouldn't impede the shot.
들이 이제 경어를 생략하잖아요. 최민식 아이가 이게 된 거예요. 그래서 민식이 형도 너무 이 몸이 젖었다 말았다 할 정도로 너무 고생을 많이 했어요. 근데 거기다 이제 막 자기 이름을 꼬맹이들이 부르니까 이제 제가 미리 액션을 취한 거죠. 그냥 확 튀어올라가지고 최민식이 네 친구야 그러고서 이제 모자를 한 대 때린 거예요. 아씨 뭡니까? 그래서 아저씨 씨발 니네 가지 마. 근데 촬영 끝날 때까지 있어가지고 박 감독님 착 화장실 갔다 올라서 한 판 붙었어? 그리고서 쓱 왔다 가서 그리고 계속 찍으세요. 절대 강자. 그러니까 그런 장면을 찍으실 수 있었던 것 같아요.
Next, they filmed the scene where Ode-soo meets Mido at the sushi bar. When writing the script, Mr. Chan-Wook knew that after 15 years of eating only fried dumplings, Dae-soo would want to order something extremely fresh. Sennaki seemed like an obvious choice. For those who don't know, sennaki is a Korean dish where a small octopus is cut into pieces while still alive and served immediately. When rehearsing the scene, Jae Min-sik thought it would be more true to his character to instead eat the live octopus, untouched. This is a bold choice, not only because it's unconventional, but also because Mr. Min-sik is a Buddhist vegetarian. Between takes, he is gagging, retching, and apologizing to the 4 octopi it took for them to get the perfect shot.
미안하다. 미안해.
다 좋았는데.
아주 이거. 이게 진짜 예술이에요. 진짜 쫙 감명에 올라가고.
When watching the behind-the-scenes footage, you can tell how Mr. Min-sik is a bit of a lovable prima donna. He's a total ham on set, never resisting the temptation to do a little physical comedy when any of the props were placed in his hand.
여기서 촬영을 하는 거예요, 오대수가. 그래서 이 휘게.
The air around him is light as he clearly takes pride in making others laugh. He gets embarrassed each time the camera catches him signing autographs for fans.
너 이런 거 찍지 말라 그랬지. 꼭 이럴 때는 어디서 나타나서.
Most egregiously, he criticized the stylist anytime they fixed his hair in an unflattering manner.
더 좀 세워가지고 더 길게끔, 길어 보이게끔 그렇게 하면은
선배님 저 이 머리 하고 싶은데요. 이렇게 말씀드렸거든요. 내가 지금 양동근인 줄 아냐고 너. 중앙에 앉아 계시던 박 감독님이 중재를 하시면서 제가 저렇게 송정이가 저렇게 뭔가를 하고 싶어 하는데
On first glance, casting Yoo Chi-tae as the billionaire villain Yoo Jin seems to be a strange decision. Actor Chi-tae was only 28 years old at the time, while Chae Min-sik was in his early 40s, and the two were supposed to have been contemporaries in high school. Realistically, the casting made no sense, but thematically, it suited the archetype that Mr. Chan-wook was going for. A stunted god of South Korea's hyper-capitalist era. Here's producer Lim Song-young on the casting decision. Park wanted his character to be someone whose mental growth has stopped. He has wealth and power and lives in this high-rise castle by himself, but his sense of self is lacking something essential. We thought a younger actor would actually convey that better. Mr. Chi-tae had a difficult role to play. Park Chan-wook had a very specific dialect in mind for the character of Woo-jin, and he grilled him relentlessly on it, unwilling to make even small consolations in the portrayal of the character.
어느 순간 그 이유진의 캐릭터가 하는 말투나 행동이나 이런 것이 내가 너무나 자세한 걸 갖고 있다는 걸 알게 됐어요. 이건 누가 와도 힘들겠다는 것을 깨닫게 됐죠.
왜냐면 감독님은 이제 구성된 연기를 워낙 좋아하시고 본인 색깔이 워낙 뚜렷하게 갖고 계신 분이시기 때문에 이제 감독님하고 이제 얘기를 나눴던 건 이제 대사, 강약 조절 그리고 이제 프레임 속에서 어떻게 보일지.
Oh, and did you notice how nicely dressed he is? Well, it wouldn't be a camcorder Cameron video if we didn't talk about the fashion. The costume designer for Oldboy is Cho Sang-kyung, who you may know from her more recent work on Squid Game. She's gone on to work with Park Chan-wook on several of his films, and has won many awards throughout her career. Here's Miss Sang Keong on how she approached the costumes for Oldboy. The script was very clear on what it wanted to be. I asked director Park questions to learn his intentions and worked out the entire concept as if I were piecing together a puzzle. For instance, when Dae-soo-oh was released, the script specifically mentioned the brand Gucci. I asked director Park if it had to be Gucci, and he answered that it just has to be a luxury brand that people know of because Woo-jin gave it to Dae-soo. When we actually filmed it, we used the brand DuPont, which we used to fill up Woo-jin's closet. I underlined checkered pattern, which was mentioned frequently in the scene descriptions. I thought about the flow of the pattern, which led to the thought of wanting this pattern to continue on location, so I used it on the pattern of Mito's costume. By doing so, one scene could connect to the next with the continuing pattern and make the world look consistent, as if it's all just a game designed by Woo-jin. I had discussions with the art director, and we created an emphasized and continuing pattern in this fashion, so that the pattern seen in the set design can continue in Mito's pattern clothes on location in the next scene. Stylistically speaking, I referenced looks from the 60s. If it does not look old today, it was because I didn't follow the trend of the time, and instead referenced a more classic look. One of the first characters I had to design for the film was Woo-jin-lee. Only when I worked out what level of clothes he liked to wear could I move on to design Dae-soo-oh's clothes to match. I spent the most time thinking of the costume Woo-jin's wearing when he runs into Dae-soo on the street, because I wanted to make sure he blends in with the crowd, which was so hard because he's so tall. The flashback scene is set in the 70s, so the costumes were summer school uniforms from that time in Korea. In the case of Woo-jin's sister, I used red and purple checkered patterns to match the overall concept of the film, so that the checkered pattern could leave an impression on Woo-jin, leading him to use purple patterns himself throughout the film. Dae-soo's style is training clothes from the time with the jacket open to make him look like a delinquent. Training clothes are what male high school students wore during military training at school in the 70s. You too can dress like Mito if you want. Miss Sang Keon dressed Mito in Custo, Barcelona, and a now-defunct Hong Kong brand called Paper Bag. She was attracted to their unfamiliar flashy print design. Mito's most memorable look is at the end of the film, when she's traipsing through deep snow wearing all red. Cho Sang-kyung said of this scene, "I wanted her to portray innocence, like Little Red Riding Hood. These sunglasses are easily the most iconic fashion statement from Oldboy. They look so effortlessly cool on him. When asked about the sunglasses, Miss Sang Kyung said, "I chose them to best express how unbothered Dae-soo is. Just snatching a random person's sunglasses from the elevator. They had to clash with Chae Min-sik's image when he wore them, in addition to leaving a strong impression on the audience. So, I purposely chose a design that men don't often wear." Okay, now back to the action. While watching the video diary, I was most shocked by the team's dedication to using practical effects. There are so many moments where they make life harder for themselves to achieve this authentic vision, when they could have easily just used CGI. They did still use computer graphics on many occasions in the movie, but it isn't heavy-handed.
각각의 친구들이 작업 팀원 중에 이 각 일원들이 각각 한 컷을 자기가 완벽하게 맡아서 합니다. 예를 들어서 키 빼는 건 누가 하고 3D는 누가 하고 그러는 프로세스가 아니라 자기가 정말로 영화의 한 일원으로서 작업을 하게 되는 그 커트는 정말 자기 거가 되는 그런 느낌으로 작업을 하게 됩니다. 그러다 보니 굉장히 어려운 장면 같은 경우 그 댐에서 이렇게 댐의 그 더러운 이물질 같은 경우를 지우는 부분 같은 경우는 정말로 많은 시행착오를 많이 겪었어요. 그 친구 같은 경우는 계속 지우고 해도 방법이 안 생기고 너무 한 달 가까이를 넘게 그 장면 하나만을 위해서 투입돼서 계속 브러싱, 그러니까 페인팅 작업을 계속한 그런 많이 기억에 남습니다.
Their use of practical effects has really given the movie a timeless look, especially since we've come a long way with technology. Even the best CGI scenes from 2003 look dated now. Some of the most harrowing practical effects to me are the ones that spark my own fear of heights. For example, the scene in which Woo-jin tries to rescue his sister Soo-ah from falling over the edge of a dam. This was first filmed with Yoo Chi-tae and Yoon Jin-so leaning over a prop railing with green screen. Later, they filmed that same scene but with young Woo-jin's actor, Yoo Yeon-sok, and the stakes are much higher. Literally. Miss Chin-so is harnessed up and dangling over the edge of a real dam this time.
상준이 나와도 돼요? 팔 줘봐, 팔. 안 보여. 어디가 아프면.
엉덩이야.
됐다. 엉덩이. 이거 이 로프. 로프 빼줘, 로프 빼줘. 얘를 내려가.
The process is clearly uncomfortable for her, but her bravery turned out to be very rewarding for her career. At just 20 years old, Yoo Chin-so won Best Actress at the 2003 Baeksang Arts Awards. But this performance almost didn't come to pass, as in the early stages of production, Yoo Chin-so almost turned down the role when she was told it would include nudity.
이렇게 길을 걸어가는데 누가 차문을 삥삥 하시는 거예요. 그래서 문을 열었는데 감독님이 거기 계신 거예요. 감독님이 너 왜 영화는 안 찍고 여기서 뭐 하고 있냐고 그런 얘기를 하셨던 게 기억이 남아요. 근데 그 만남이 저는 왠지 되게 운명처럼 느껴지는 거예요.
One of Oldboy's most defining factors is its depictions of violence. Missing are the dramatic and fantastical movements found in kung fu movies. Instead, the fighting in Oldboy is grounded, heavy. Each kick, punch, and fall feels as though it has real weight behind it. Simply put, for the most part, the action looks and feels real. And the cast and crew went through hell to ensure this. But no scene demonstrates this approach more than the rightfully iconic hallway scene. It is a classic trope in fighting movies, one hero against a host of adversaries. And more often than not, these scenes are cheesy and inadequately choreographed. They don't feel real. But Oldboy does. Park Chan-Wook famously despises directing action scenes. The problem is that I'm not a fan of action movies. I don't like watching them, and making them stresses me out even more. To make his life easier, he hired Yen Ki-yeon to be the martial arts director. Together, along with cinematographer Chung Chung-hoon, they storyboarded a fight with over 100 shots. Jae Min-sik personally trained with Mr. Ki-yeon to memorize the 70 different choreographed moves needed for the scene. So now, we've come to the day of the corridor scene. They ran several rehearsals with all the cast members, and Mr. Min-sik was sweaty and struggling to keep up. Despite it all being stunt choreography, the actors still make physical contact with each other. There are times when Mr. Sik actually gets hurt.
얼음 있으면 좀만 주실래요?
Watching them from the monitor, chain-smoking cigarettes, Park Chan-wook starts to think. We held a rehearsal, and as I was watching the scene, I had all these thoughts going through my head. First of all, how are we going to get through all these setups I had planned? We were already running short on shooting days. With self-doubt circling in his mind, he took a step back to reanalyze the character's motivations. Mr. Chan-wook asked himself, what is the meaning of this scene? Because our character wasn't fighting the actual villain, Woo-jin, it was just a bunch of nameless thugs. He instructed the actors to get into costume and rehearse the scene one more time, but at a slower tempo to preserve their energy. Even when doing the sequence at half speed, Mr. Min-sik was drained and breathless near the end. He couldn't even lift his head, and that actually sparked a thought in my head. I thought, isn't that exactly what we're trying to do here? This scene was about the entertainment that the genre film provides, but it was more than that. It's really about this character's emotion. It's about this one man's fight against this big criminal organization, and the loneliness and fatigue that he feels. We want the audience to be asking, when will this finally end for him?
근데 내일 아침에 주가 좀 애로사항이 많을 것 같아가지고 오늘 요 탄력 받았을 때 많이 찍어 놓는 게 오히려 더.
Despite Jae Min-sik's objections, Mr. Chan-wook calls it a day.
이거 마지막까지 보고 상상히 끝내고 가면 참 좋은데.
On day 2 of the hallway fight scene, Mr. Chan-wook announced that he wanted the entire group fight to be a single wide-angle shot.
좀 특이하게 가는 건데.
아주 끝까지 그냥. 끝까지 그냥 한 방에 그냥.
So as a result, the stunt coordinator, Mr. Ki-yeon, had to reimagine his carefully planned choreography on the spot. Sore from the previous day's work, Jae Min-sik asks if they can shorten the fight sequence since he was having trouble remembering all his moves.
좀 줄여. 조금만 줄이면. 기억하기도 좋고. 너무 많다고. 지속 시간은 안 줄였으면 좋겠어요. 이거는 이거의 매력은 굉장히 길게 이렇게 갔다가 또 이렇게 갔다가 카메라가 인물 따라서 그래서 와 정말 길다라는 기분은 들어야 돼요.
After every take, the actors gather around a stone-faced Mr. Chan-wook as he watches back the scene on the monitor.
감독의 즐거움이니까 그런 낙을 그거보다도 대역 없이 그 고령의 배우가 직접 진짜 자기 몸으로 커팅 없이 끝까지 해본 그런 쾌감이 좋다고 생각해요.
After 16 full takes, Park Chan-wook is finally pleased with one.
이걸로 올게. 네, 좋아요.
Here's cinematographer Chung-eun on remembering that day. When the actors and stuntmen heard that it was going to be a single take, they gave it their all, expecting to get it done with. But after giving it their all for the first full day, when director Park had us move into the second day, they just couldn't do it anymore. They were too exhausted. They were actually falling down, and their punches didn't have any strength anymore. And that's when Park said, "Okay, I think we got it." I realized he had been waiting 2 days for them to be tired, so I asked him, why didn't you just ask them to move in a tired manner? And he said, that kind of lonely, hopeless movement cannot be performed. And he's right. The fight scene has so much feeling in it. I remember thinking, wow, that's the power of Park Chan-wook as a filmmaker.
지금 잘할 것 같지요. 다시는 안 해 이런 거. 끝이야.
Cinematographer Chung-eun was very early in his career when he worked on Oldboy. And he landed the job in large part due to his idea of using the color green to express psychological torment.
어떤 상황에선 그린이라고 하는 것은 굉장히 시원하고 맑고 자연을 연상하는 그림도 있을 수 있고요. 이 영화에서 또 이 씬에서는 그것과는 다르게 뭔가 부식된 것 같은, 낡고 뭔가 썩은 것 같은 곰팡이나.
My favorite anecdote of his takes place on May 30th, when they were filming the school flashback.
육체적으로 되게 힘들었을 때가 있었어요. 올드보이는. 스테디캠은 되게 가벼운 카메라 올려야 되는데 무거운 카메라를 올린 거예요. 그러다 보니까 힘으로 버티게 되고 다음 날부터 이제 치질이 생기기 시작했죠.
The final scene of the film takes place in a winter wonderland, and this scene would prove one of the most difficult to film. In July, the whole cast and crew flew out to Mount Lyford in the famously beautiful Southern Alps of New Zealand.
기분은 앞으로 멀었구나 그런 생각. 가면 또 춥잖아요. 나 이러고 왔는데 네? 이따가 트렁크 열어서 잠바 주섬주섬 꺼내고 생각하니까.
Upon landing, news spread of a major setback. Much of their luggage, including costumes and camera equipment, had gone missing in transit.
울트라 프라임 렌즈 있고 우리 도구 박스 늘어났고 필터 박스 하나.
요거 마지막 저거 하나. 상황은 지금 되게 안 좋고요.
Costume designer Song Ki-on had to shop around the South Island of New Zealand and find replacements for her missing, meticulously planned out costumes. I worked around Dae Soo-oh and his relationship with other characters, landing on the idea for a red shirt for the ending. But because there was a flight delay when we filmed abroad, we could not get the planned costume in time. Instead, we had to use a raincoat that was found in New Zealand. This was actually the first set experience that taught me that film productions sometimes don't go as planned. The pressure intensifies when Mr. Chan-Wook realizes they'll only have around 6 hours of sunlight each day. They had a tight schedule with their trip being only 4 days. Their first day on location was almost entirely used to set up.
어차피 찍을 시간이 안 되니까 정신이 날 것 같아. 이거 한 컷 찍으면 날 넘어갈 것 같은데.
So they were thinking about more filmmaker. The machine. Yeah, machine then.
11번에 5번 컷만 찍고 오늘 끝낼 테니까 빨리 준비합시다.
Park Chan-wook has always been an even-keeled director, known for keeping his frustrations mostly to himself.
거친 현장이 아니에요. 부드럽고
조용하고.
네, 되게 조용하고 소리 같은 거 지르신 적 단 한 번도 없고 감독님께서 가장 우리가 긴장을 빡 할 때가 그냥 감독님이 이 정도 하시면은 큰일 났다 정도 되는 거예요. 이렇게 뭐 소리를 치고 이런 적이 없으세요? 한 번도.
얘네들한테는 안 하지.
But on this day, grappling with the time limitations of the shoot, he finally lost his temper in front of the crew over what was really a simple miscommunication.
분장하지 말란 얘기 못 들었어? 바뀌었다는 얘기 다 들었잖아.
이게 순서가 바뀌었다는 얘기는 못 들었어요 저희.
그래? 아니 대희가 아까 너하고 무선 교신하는 거 옆에서 우리가 다 들었는데 무슨 소리야.
그런 말 안 나왔지 언니.
다 들었어 우리가. 네 목소리도 듣고. 분장하지 말라는 얘기 못 들었어?
분장하지 말아서 분장 안 하고 있었는데 못 찍는 줄 몰라서 승신 언니가 먼저 왔고요. 저희는 승신 언니 찍고 있는.
계속 너 기다린 거 아니야 지금.
죄송합니다.
아니 뭐.
죄송합니다.
자 준비하자.
자. 대희는 분명히 똑바로 얘기했단 말이야. 우리 다 들었어.
제 잘못 들었나 봐요. 죄송합니다.
They wrapped shooting in New Zealand a day and a half late.
왜 남의 밥줄을 이렇게 위협하고 그래?
네? 편안한 죽음이 이러시는 우리 감독. 거의 시체처럼 주무시는군요.
임필이.
And while it may have been the last scene in the film, it was far from the last scene to be shot, and already they were over budget and behind schedule. The shoot was initially set for 48 days, but stretched to a total of 72, and the original budget of 3.2 billion won was exceeded well before completion. Producer Song Yeon privately took the brunt of this pressure as he used his personal credit card to ensure production could continue.
그래서 참 프로듀서가 자기 카드 쓰고 자기 뭐 와이프 카드도 쓰고 막 이렇게 돌려막기 해가면서 그렇게 영화를 찍었어요. 그런 내색을 안 했으니까 모르고 그냥 막 한 거죠. 나중에서야 그 얘기를 듣고
참 미안하고 고맙더라고요.
By the time they filmed the penthouse scene, they had little money to build the set. Which, as you can imagine, giving the appearance of wealth while having little to work with was no easy feat. Production designer Ryo Song-hee often fought with producers to create her vision.
제작사 입장에서는 계속 좀 오버가 된다라고 생각하고 많이 싸웠었던 것 같아요. 예. 지금은 크게 싸울 일은 없겠죠. 근데 그때는 나 나름대로는 아니 그러면 뭐 이거밖에 없는데 어떻게 1% 잘 사는 사람의 집을 하라는 거야. 뭐 이제 여러 가지 그런 게 있었고.
And the scenes shot in the penthouse were to be some of the most harrowing yet, as the movie reached a peak in its physical and mental brutality. A number of significant injuries were suffered in the filming of these scenes.
오른쪽인데 놀란 것 같은데 film에서 다리 발목이죠? 아니 발목이 아니라 엉덩이.
The most wincing of those injuries happens when Ode-soo is thrown into a window. Stunt double Chi Hun-chung appears to be hurt after every failed attempt. They wanted the fall to look natural, and not like they were clearly using a harness. Well, natural they wanted, natural they got. After several failed takes, director Chan-Wook suggests they take a break, but Mr. Han-chung, determined, asks to try one more time.
한 번만 딱 가시고 안 되면
우리 안 해도 되는데
좀 천천히 나가는 느낌이 있어요. 내려오셔가지고 살짝 뛰시니까 그런 것 같은데
아까처럼
높게
높은 데서 해가지고 확 갔다가 부딪히기 전에 그냥 놓는 거예요. 하나, 둘, 셋! 괜찮아? 누워있어요, 스택에. 잠깐만. 이거 뺄게요. 좀 정해. 오케이. 수고하셨습니다.
거꾸로 떨어져야 되는데 와이어를 해주긴 했지만 거꾸로 쳐박히니까 이제 머리를 찌면서 이제 이가 좀 상했거든요.
친구랑 통화하는 걸 제가 어느 날 문득 들었어요. 야, 나 씨발 좆됐어 이빨 다 나갔어 그러는데 미안한 거예요 제가. 이렇게 수그리고 있다가 좀 이따 수란이한테 갔어요. 너 지금 갖고 있는 돈이 얼마냐. 그래서 전대를 뒤지는 총 50만 원 있습니다. 그거 다 내놔 그랬어요. 그래서 양기령 무술 감독님한테 드렸죠. 정말 죄송하다고. 그 돈조차 줄 수 있는 상황이 아니었었어요.
And if all this seems a little neglectful to say the least, that's because it was. The Korean film industry didn't establish labor unions until 2005, and as a result, the working conditions were often grueling and without proper guidelines. There were times when the Oldboy cast and crew would work for as long as 48 hours continuously. Whenever production stretched past the 12-hour mark, Mr. Chan-Wook, ever non-dictatorial, would hold a vote amongst the crew about whether to break for a reset or forge on. More often than not, the crew voted to keep going.
오늘 밤 담배 모인다.
몇 사람인데? 빨리니까 되는 거.
14, 15, 16입니다. 그럼 촬영하겠습니다.
지금 말하는 거야?
알겠습니다.
Cinematographer Chung-moon says that while he was shuddering behind the viewfinder during the filming of Chae Min-sik's explosive performance during the climax, several other crew members were passed out on the floor from exhaustion in the corners of the set.
타이트하게 짜지는 바람에 제가 영화 촬영하면서 자본 거는 이 작품이 처음이에요. 그리고 이제 마지막에 펜트하우스에서 있다가 일어날 때 그때 진짜 잠들었었어요.
One of the most difficult scenes to watch in the entire movie is the one in which Dae-soo barks like a dog and cuts off his own tongue. And the scene was equally difficult to film. Not on a technical level, but on a visceral, emotional level. Chung Chan-woon had set up one camera to adhere to the storyboards, and the second camera he held himself, so as to be able to adapt on the fly to the dynamics of Chae Min-sik's performance. Mr. Chung-woon would recall, My camera was physically very close to him, and he felt almost dangerous in that moment. Watching from the viewfinder, even with the awareness that this was merely a performance, it felt like he was going to explode and take me with him. I remember holding my breath and sighing, or even moaning at times. I had to warn the sound department to be especially careful about that, because I just couldn't help it. Mr. Min-sik later explained his perspective on the scene during a Korean TV interview by saying, "Words that weren't in the script came out of my mouth without thinking. I was Odesu when we were making the film. I don't remember what I said in that scene. I went to the extreme. I did it until people in the crew said, 'Please stop now.' I was just going with the flow. Maybe it came from my stage experience. It was like surfing. I was riding the wave of his agony."
드디어 펜트하우스. 이제 제 목소리가 이렇게 쉬었습니다. 울릉선 넘기가 힘들 줄이야. 유달리 아주 힘든 하여튼 좋은 결과가 있었으면 좋겠습니다.
They wrapped filming on July 23rd, 2003.
나요. 이제 무슨 낙으로 살죠? 오래 진행이 돼서 미안하게 생각해요. 오랫동안 붙들어 놓고 고생을 시켜서 마무리 잘 해서 그래도 고생한 보람이 있다고.
After months of physical, grueling work, the movie was finally complete. But was it all worth it? And the answer is, resoundingly, yes. Oldboy was an instant hit in South Korea upon its release in November 2003. The film was submitted to the 2004 Cannes Film Festival, a year that happened to feature Quentin Tarantino as chair of the jury. Tilda Swinton, who was also on the jury, jokingly warned Mr. Chan-Wook to watch out because Tarantino would probably steal a lot from Oldboy.
상을 또 발표할 때 타란티노가 또 예외적으로 꼭 그 상을 발표할 때만 이렇게 뭐 이 영화에 상을 주게 돼서 매우 자랑스럽게 생각한다라는 그런 말로 시작을 해서 좀 뿌듯한 마음이 있었고.
The film would make history as the first Korean film to win the Cannes Grand Prix, but it would miss out on the Palme d'Or as it was awarded to Michael Moore's Fahrenheit 9/11.
이렇게 열광하는 건 처음 봤어요. 여기서 내가 나한테 와서 얘기해주는 사람들 말을 들어보니까 여기서조차도 스캔들러스하다고 그래서 무슨 주요 상들 감독이나 뭐 그런 큰 상은 아마 힘들 거라고 그렇게들 얘기하더라고요. 왜요? 그러니까 너무 논란이 심해서 거의 스캔들이라고 그러네요.
Oldboy wouldn't receive a theatrical release in America until 2005, where, despite its success in South Korea and in the festival circuit, it was shown at just a smattering of locations throughout the country. It was still a foreign film after all. It would earn just $69,000 in its opening weekend and would eventually top out at $707,000. But it quickly achieved cult status, and DVD sales would prove to be long, stable, and strong. Through the years, Oldboy's impact on cinema has only continued to grow. Though far from the first South Korean film to deserve the praise it received, it was undoubtedly the first to put the country's film industry on the map for the rest of the world to see.
올드보이는 뭐 여러 가지 의미가 있지만 가장 큰 것은 국제적으로 제일 알려진 영화고 국제적으로 제일 인기를 끈 영화고.
There's so much to love about this movie, from the moody soundtrack to the unconventional editing. The action scenes are engaging, the narrative dialogue is poetic, and the twist ending involving hypnosis is unforgettable. But in my opinion, the nihilistic depiction of revenge is what makes it the most unique and harrowing. To close, I would like to share the following quote from our superb director, Park Chan-Wook. The reason behind revenge is the loss of something. You might have lost a loved one, or you might have lost your wealth. And because you lost something, you feel a sense of revenge. But the thing is, you cannot retrieve what you've already lost. Sure, if we're talking about the example of wealth, you can gain wealth again, but you'll never be able to enjoy the same wealth at that particular time when you have lost it. So, because of this irredeemable loss that cannot be fulfilled by revenge, that's why people feel emptiness even after the success of a revenge. In the end, I really think everything is about time. Your loved one will die ultimately, and you're no longer able to spend more time with them. That's what fueled revenge here. The stolen time can never come back. Whoever is executing this act of revenge knows that already. That they cannot retrieve what they've lost, and they know they're only going to be left with a sense of emptiness in the end. The only way they can enjoy it is to find happiness through the process of this act of revenge. That's the only time that they can enjoy. Yay! Thank you for making it to the end of this video. I worked so hard on it. Thank you to my lovely Patreon supporters and my channel members. I could not be here doing this today without you. You support me in so many ways, and I love our community over there. It's so much fun getting to chat with you and to know that you're always down to watch whatever weird movie I pick out next. So thank you. If you guys aren't already, please consider checking out my Patreon. You can do movie requests over there. I watch X-Files over there. I have unedited reactions to movies and just all kinds of other crazy stuff. So check it out if that sounds like fun to you. It's just a great way to support me overall. So thank you guys for being here with me today. Camcorder Cameron, signing out.